The fourth strike. Once again it's springtime, and the weather was getting just right. For some people that is the beginning of their favorite pastime sport, baseball. In a small cul-de-sac lived a 13-year-old boy named Timothy. Tim is a huge fan of baseball and always dreamed of playing in the major leagues. Tim was the ringleader of his three other friends. One is Thomas, 11, who didn't talk much and stayed in the background of the crew. Theodore, 12, is the brains of the group who kept his head in a book. It is mainly about baseball, so I guess that's how they got along so well. Then there is Louis, 14, who is a bit of a wild card, always ready to get into mischief. Lou, they called him that for short because he always carried around a Louisville Slugger baseball bat. Every weekend the four of them would get on their bikes and ride down to the park where some of the surrounding neighborhood kids would play. There would always be some kids gathered around the diamond trying to get a game started. Of course, the four of them would always be on the same team, no questions asked. Tim would be the pitcher, Louis would be their star hitter, and Thomas was one of the outfielders. Theodore chose to make the plays for the team due to his asthma. While taking a break between games, the boys sat down to enjoy their packed lunch they brought with them. Tim always liked to talk about pitchers and who he'd wanted to be like when he got into the majors. Louis jumped in and said, "You heard about that pitcher that got struck by lightning? I saw it on the internet where back in 1919 a guy named Raymond Caldwell was a pitcher for the Cleveland Indians. On August 24th when they were playing against the Philadelphia Athletics he was struck on the mound and lived." Tim took a big swallow and said, "I hope that never happens to me." Theodore, trying to give Tim some comfort, told his friend the odds of being struck are like 1 in 3,000. Afterward, Tim was still disturbed by the story Louis told him. Later that evening when Tim was at home looking up stats on his laptop, he decided to look up what Louis talked about. Louis can be somewhat of an exaggerator, but this time he was telling the truth. A couple of weeks went by and Tim eventually got over what Louis told him. Tim met up with Theodore to work on some new pitching strategies before meeting up with the rest of the guys to head to the park. After picking up addition players, Theodore looked around saying to himself, "Wow, we got a lot of people this time, this is turning out to be a good game today." Tim's team was down 2-4 at the top of the 9th inning. Luckily Louis was up at bat with a man on first and third base. Tim looked at Louis from the bench cheering him on. The opposing pitcher gave the nod and drew back for the pitch. With a loud crack, Louis hit a home run, making the score 5-4. It's now the bottom of the 9th, and all Tim has to do is strike them out and they win. Before he took the mound, Theodore looks at him and said, "Give him the heat." As he took the mound, Tim saw a flash out the corner of his eye. "There's a storm coming, let's make this quick," Tim thought to himself. Tim struck out 2 players with ease before the final batter came to the plate. Focusing on the game with a win on the line, he winds up for the pitch. Strike 1. A quick grin was on Tim's face for a brief moment. Theodore blurted out, "Good, now stay focused." Another flash caught Tim's attention as he was about to throw the ball and he almost hit a player for the walk. Louis screamed, "Get your head in the game, just 2 more strikes and we win." Tim shook his head and zeroed in on the catcher's mitt. With a quick nod, drew back for the pitch, strike 2. Theodore gave Tim a big smile saying, "One more strike." This time thunder could be heard as a few drops of rain began to fall. The other team wants to call a rain out, but Lewis blurted out, "No way, it's just one more pitch away." Tim looks behind him and up to the sky, thinking back to what Lewis said. With his fellow teammates cheering him on, Tim turned and got ready for the last pitch. He gave the nod, and just as he threw the ball, a loud bang rang in the field and everyone grabbed their ears. But when the umpire never gave the call, everyone just looked. Everyone's jaw dropped as people from both teams ran to the field. Lying on the ground, Tim laid there with a big hole in the back of his helmet where he had been stricken by lightning. Theodore screamed, "Somebody call an ambulance." Thomas, who was knelt beside him crying, said, "It's too late, he's dead." At the funeral, Lewis walked up to the casket with a long bag in his hand. He unzips the bag and pulled out a bat. Leaning forward, he places the bat next to the casket, whispering, "We won, Tim, we won." Theodore walked up afterward and reached in his pocket to pull out a ball. Placing it next to the bat Lewis left, he said with tears streaming down from his face, "We will always miss you, Tim." It has been nearly 5 years since that incident happened. Lewis never played baseball since and vowed to never go anywhere near a diamond again. Thomas, although hardly spoke, went into a state of depression and developed a stuttering problem. Theodore, however, didn't want his best friend's memory to fade and went on to become a little league coach. It was a mid-Saturday afternoon, and Theodore was at his old childhood diamond coaching a game with some of the local kids. Theodore happens over his shoulder and saw a familiar face. After all these years, Theodore started to tear up when he saw none other than Lewis leaning on the fence. Theodore was about to walk over to Lewis when Lewis put up his hand and made a gesture telling his friend to finish the game. The score was 5-4 and it was the bottom of the 9th inning. Theodore looked over at Lewis as they both stopped for a moment, looking at the pitcher's mound. It was a partly cloudy day and the pitcher had just struck 2 people out. The pitcher wound up and threw a fastball. "Strike one," yelled the umpire. Theodore and Lewis looked at each other as tears started to form. The pitcher made the wind-up and threw the ball. "Strike 2. A sound of thunder could be heard from a distance as everyone paused and turned around towards the sound. The entire neighborhood knew of the story and they all took a moment of silence before the last pitch. The batter determines to not repeat history and strike out. He gripped his bat firmly as he waited for the pitch. Just as the pitcher nodded to the catcher and made the pitch, as quick gust of wind followed behind the pitcher, increasing the speed of the throw. The ball hit the catcher's mitt so hard it left a red mark on his hand. Just as the batter was about to walk across the plate to walk off the field, he just dropped to the ground. The umpire didn't see anything because it was already the 3rd strike. The catcher helped the kid to his feet, asking if he was okay. The kid nodded and walked over to the bench to let his coach check him out. Looking at his side, his coach raised an eyebrow to see a circular bruise to what looked like a mark from a baseball. Theodore and Lewis both looked at the pitcher's mound to what they swore they saw a fading aura of a person standing there cheering.